Among the annals of ancient history, few events possess such mystical power and enduring significance as the Battle of Thermopylae. There, 300 valiant Spartans stood as an unyielding wall against the countless hordes of Persian invaders. This clash is forever etched in humanity's memory as a symbol of incredible valor and self-sacrifice. However, viewed strictly from a military perspective, the battle itself offered little strategic advantage and did not immediately alter the war's outcome. Despite the unparalleled steadfastness and heroism of the defenders, who held their ground until their last breath, the Persian forces ultimately managed to breach the narrow pass. Their path to Athens was then open, leading to the ancient city's eventual burning. Yet, the true significance of Thermopylae lies on an entirely different plane, and it is this underlying reason that cemented its place as one of antiquity's most crucial episodes. The battle catalyzed profound shifts in the self-awareness of the Hellenes, fundamentally altering their perception of themselves and their place in the world. At that fateful moment, when the Persian threat loomed over the peninsula, no unified state that we today call Greece yet existed. What existed instead was a diverse patchwork of independent city-states, or polis, which, despite sharing common traits, speaking similar dialects and worshipping the same gods, were often locked in irreconcilable enmity with one another. Moreover, for many of these fragmented Hellenic communities, internal strife and mutual animosity were far more palpable than any ephemeral sense of commonality with their linguistic and religious neighbors. Surprisingly, some even viewed the mighty Persian Empire not as an implacable foe, but as a potential ally or patron whose interests might align with their own, setting them against the interests of other Hellenic cities. It is within this complex context that the Battle of Thermopylae acquired a completely different, indeed fateful, significance, which deserves closer examination. Unlike Spartan women, Athenian women could not own property or manage their own households. Furthermore, foreign slaves, though not subjected to the brutal treatment of Spartan helots, comprised roughly half the population of this great city-state. Yet, facing the looming threat of a Persian invasion, even long-standing and irreconcilable rivals like Sparta and Athens managed to unite their efforts. Sparta contributed its diplomatic and military might, while Athens offered its formidable navy and creative potential. Together, Athens and Sparta stood for freedom and against Persian enslavement. However, their definition of freedom essentially meant only their own liberty to, at their discretion, involve other city-states in either a democratic system or a rigid military culture. But what about the so-called Persian enslavement? While slaves certainly existed in Persia, particularly among wealthy aristocrats, the Persian Empire generally did not rely on their labor as its primary driving force. Workers who constructed the magnificent monuments of Persepolis, built vast canals across the empire, and engineered intricate underground irrigation tunnels received wages commensurate with their skill and expertise. Moreover, Persian emperors typically did not impose their culture and religion on conquered peoples. Persians often acted more as liberators than conquerors, returning people to their ancestral lands if a previous ruler had exiled or oppressed them. Cyrus the Great, the empire's founder, became famous for his decree freeing the Jews from Babylonian captivity. This act allowed the entire Jewish elite to return home, while Cyrus gained a strategically beneficial loyal buffer state between Persia and Egypt. By the time the Persians clashed with the Greeks at Thermopylae, the Persian Empire spanned colossal territories, from northern India to Egypt and Ethiopia. The Persian bureaucracy managed this vast and diverse realm with remarkable efficiency. As long as subjugated lands paid their taxes diligently and did not rebel, Persia left them undisturbed, granting significant autonomy. However, if they dared to revolt, the punishment was merciless and severe. This is precisely how the chain of events began. In 499 BCE, Greek cities in Ionia rebelled against Persian rule, declaring themselves independent democratic states. Athens, naturally, aided its new allies, thereby earning the permanent and powerful enmity of Persia. In response, Persian Emperor Darius vowed to raze Athens to the ground. He invaded Greece but suffered a crushing defeat in the famous Battle of Marathon. After this, the Greeks anticipated an even larger invasion, this time from Darius's son, Xerxes. The Greeks meticulously prepared their defenses on two fronts. the Athenian fleet was to prevent the Persian navy from landing troops behind the Greek army, while Sparta and its allies were to hold back the Persian army on land at a narrow mountain pass, named after nearby hot springs. This pass is historically known as Thermopylae. The Persians advanced with an army of approximately 200,000 men, while the Greeks numbered only 7,000. Leading the Greek contingent were nearly 300 Spartan hoplites, or spearmen. The main body of the Greek army was to join later, after the completion of sacred festivals, assuming, of course, the advance forces were still alive by then. Despite the colossal numerical superiority of the Persians, the Greeks chose an extremely advantageous terrain, a narrow pass that allowed them to fight in shifts, utilizing their forces with maximum efficiency. It was an ideal location for forming a phalanx. First, Persian archers attempted to probe the Greek formation, but their arrows caused virtually no harm to the heavily armored hoplites. Next, Xerxes sent 2,000 battle-hardened light spearmen into the fray, but their wicker shields proved useless against the hoplites' long spears. The Persian army was accustomed to operating on open plains and deserts. They practiced a light, mobile form of warfare that prevented them from dislodging the heavily armored phalanx from the narrow pass. Xerxes then committed his elite royal guard, whom the Greeks called the Immortals. Yet, even they failed to achieve their objective. The Greeks were simply too well armed and positioned in an exceptionally strong defensive location. However, there existed a narrow mountain path that bypassed the pass. The Greeks were aware of it, and some of their soldiers had been dispatched to guard it. Unfortunately, a traitor among the defenders revealed the path's existence to the Persians. The Persians ascended 1,000 meters, then marched single file, surprising the relaxed defenders of this path during the night. By dawn, they had emerged behind the main Greek forces. The Spartans decided to fight as a rear guard, covering the retreat of the remaining forces, and several hundred of their allies voluntarily chose to stay with them. The victory came at a high cost for Xerxes. He lost thousands of soldiers and 2 of his half-brothers. Nevertheless, he ultimately invaded Greece and plundered cities that refused to submit to his authority. He entered Athens and fulfilled his father's promise to burn the Acropolis as punishment for the Ionian revolt. However, Xerxes found the city deserted. The Athenian fleet had been evacuated in advance. A month later, this same fleet skillfully lured the Persian ships into the Battle of Salamis and dealt them a crushing blow that altered the course of the war. Subsequently, a coalition of Greek forces, led by the Spartans, decisively defeated the Persian army at Plataea, bringing an end to the protracted conflict. But why is it that everyone ultimately knows about the Greek defeat at Thermopylae, while decisive victories like Salamis and Plataea remain relatively unknown to the general public? This is because the Battle of Thermopylae helped define Greek, and consequently, Western culture. All of this was made possible by one man, Herodotus. Decades after the Greco-Persian War, Herodotus wrote a groundbreaking book about it, one of the first works where history writing was approached as inquiry rather than myth-making. His inspiring account of Thermopylae is precisely the story we all know today. However, it's important to remember that Herodotus had an underlying motive. In his histories, he actively advocated for a contrast with the Persian East, which he depicted as emotional, despotic, and obsessed with subservience and slavery. In reality, such a simplistic dichotomy does not reflect the complexities of ancient Greece and Persia, because history and human civilizations are never that simple. This narrative indeed proved extremely appealing for shaping the idea of a global East and West with opposing, supposedly incompatible values, and it continues to be retold as a story of a clash of civilizations. But the truth is always more complex and multifaceted. This historical contact between Asia and Europe did not so much save what we now call Western civilization as, conversely, help create it. Athens' open society endured long enough for subsequent governments to emulate it, borrowing its principles. Sparta, for its part, contributed ideas of service to the state, military professionalism, and compulsory state education. And when Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he was so impressed by its local bureaucratic system that he simply copied it, thereby spreading ideas of professional bureaucracy and a multicultural, tolerant society. We live in a post-Thermopylae era, and neither ancient Greece nor Persia purely represents any of us. We are all heirs to both.